All right. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our webinar on implementing EMDR on a telehealth platform. My name is Lindsay Simpson. I'm the program administrator for the Center for Evidence to Practice. For those of you who are not familiar with our work, we are a partnership with the Office of Behavioral Health, and our mission is to expand access to evidence-based programs for children and families served by the Medicaid system across the state of Louisiana. And during this time of the COVID pandemic, we've shifted our focus a little bit, and we're trying to offer more online training and some training specific to supporting behavioral health providers who are trained and or certified in an evidence-based program in implementing that over a telehealth platform. So for those of you who would like to receive CEUs, those will be sent out at the end if you participated. And I see that there are some folks who joined by telephone, so thank you. But if you could either enter your name into the chat box, and I will update your phone number so that it'll register in the system so you can get CEUs, or you can email me, or there's an option in the top corner to change your name. So that's just for the folks who called in via telephone and not through the link. Other than that, just another quick announcement. After the webinar, we will talk a little bit about consultation calls. If you feel like you would like some more support in practicing EMDR specific to telehealth, we will send out a registration link so that you can participate in some consultation calls, either one-on-one with Carol or perhaps in a small group. So I will hand over the presentation now to Carol Miles. Many of you know Carol and maybe have trained with her here in Louisiana. She is a licensed clinical social worker and the president of the EMDR International Association, and a trainer and a consultant for EMDR. So thank you, Carol.
Thanks, Lindsay. So I'm really grateful to be here today in a lot of different ways, for sure. We're all in the midst of this crazy time, but it's also a fun thing for me to see how many of you out there I've trained. So hello to all of you. I've done some private hellos on chat while I was sitting here waiting anxiously for things to turn on. Those of you I don't know, I would love to get to know you better. I would like to see you included more in our local contact with one another as EMDR trainers. So across the state of Louisiana, we have a variety of ways to be in touch with one another. Right now, while we're all practicing social distancing, some of those ways are going to be more on the computer. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about a few of those. I have on my Emdr hat right now. Those of you who know me know I have a lot of different hats to wear. But as a board member for Emdr, I feel like I would be really remiss without suggesting the importance of participating in that forum as a membership association. Emdr provides on a national basis and even internationally a lot of information that's really important to have. Right now, we are the only membership association that has produced guidelines for telehealth. We spent a year last year looking at that as a board with a task force, and at the end of the year voted to accept the guidelines as they were presented. Those are now posted online, and there are links to those in some of your handouts. The process of getting those together was transforming for me, because I had years ago gone to a training that Roy Huggins from the Person-Centered Tech group, and I had gone to his training on how to do virtual therapy. Somebody has to mute themselves. Thanks. It looks like that might have been Rebecca. Hey, Rebecca. So the process of learning about being a virtual therapist was one that I became acquainted with a number of years ago, and my thought was, nah, I don't want to do that. So I learned that there were a lot of steps to take in order to get really good at it, and I felt like what I did worked well enough. Then last year, we had the task force, and the task force presented all of these different aspects of it and ways to look at it. And I really became persuaded that doing EMDR in a virtual platform was as good as doing it in person. Yes, I said as good. We have no research at this point to prove that. Total disclosure, just want to say the truth. We do have a lot of research that shows therapy in a virtual platform or online is working as successfully as therapy does in face-to-face sessions. So if it works for other therapies, why would it not work for EMDR is sort of my position on it. So what I would like to suggest is that you have an open mind today, because here we are in the midst of a pandemic and we need to do something to take care of our folks. And if we can do EMDR, we're going to be more efficient and more effective with them. You all know that from your training and your work up to this point. So that was a year of me trying to figure all of that out. And here I am. And I have been, if everybody can mute themselves, that would help. Great, thanks. So if I've learned anything since the middle of March, it is that I can do EMDR successfully online. And so I'm going to talk to you today about some ways to do that. When we finish the pandemic, and I like to say when we're finished the pandemic, that we will be able to go back to face-to-face counseling. The world is never going to be the same. So here we are. Sorry. So I wasn't nervous before the presentation, but I'm a big crier. Those of you who know me know that. Those of you who don't know me know that too now. So when we go back to normal, maybe you'll decide that this method of working is going to be effective for you. Let's see. I don't know. There will be changes with regard to requirements that are not currently in place. I'll present some of those today, and you can find out more of those. We'll see what happens. Additionally, this year, Emdr put together, and in an incredibly fast way, we had another task force made up primarily of board members, but also some other folks who put together guidelines for us to do basic training. So if any of your colleagues are now interested in getting training in EMDR, we will be having EMDR basic training on, we have currently EMDR basic training being provided throughout the United States. My next training will be in July. You're welcome to go to my website and take a look at that with your colleagues, however you want to do it, but there are going to be people everywhere. We had 40 applications that were submitted. I think 2 weeks ago, we submitted the interim standards applications, and so people are doing it all over the place. So what are we going to do today? Today, we're going to do lectures with some breaks, and we're going to do some demos to kind of keep you on your toes. I don't know about you, but I have spent a lot of time in my crash course of learning how to do all of this on webinars, and they are tiring. I have found out that actually doing webinars is more tiring than attending them, but that's true. We have our chat here on Zoom. I think most of you are familiar with that. So the chat box is a good place. If you have questions, Lindsay's going to monitor the chat box for me. If 4 or 5 people all have the same question, she'll break in and let me know I need to look at them. She'll answer any technical help that way, or you can call her in. I believe there's a call-in number for you. We're also going to do some breakout rooms today, which is a special feature allowed at a pro level or webinar level for these kinds of trainings. But you can use the opportunity to practice with a colleague. Lindsay is going to put you together randomly with other people there. You're not picking your friend to go off and chat with, but maybe you'll be paired with someone you know or not. We'll see what happens. But in that breakout time, you're going to get a chance to do some things that will facilitate your work with your clients. And so it's going to be quick. It's not going to be anything that's scary. This is not going to be doing therapy. This is not your practicum all over again. We're just going to practice a couple of skills that are more technical for you to be able to feel more competent in doing this work. You don't have to go. If you want to send a text or a chat directly to Lindsay to tell her, no, I'm not going to be available then, that'll be fine. We'll do that later on. She's also posted in the chat room the PDF of all of the handouts that were sent. It was also sent out in an email, I think yesterday, from Lindsay, but she's also posted that in chat, which I found out this morning. You can post files in chat, new to me, so that was good. And what we're going to do then is move into some content. Content is going to be first a review of EMDR therapy. I don't know how many of you have done EMDR, when, where, how. We're going to do a poll on that in a minute. And then I'm going to move into telemedicine specifics with EMDR therapy. Some of you submitted questions ahead of time. I was able to see those. The answers are incorporated into my discussion with you today. So I think you're going to get your questions answered. If they aren't, you do have consultation hours available to you provided through the center. So that's the plan for today. So we're going to talk about in the review those 8 phases, 3 prongs, and the AIP model. But first, let's take a moment and let's do a poll. So I'm going to ask you to, so I'm going to relaunch. Okay, I got it. I'm going to launch the poll, and I'm going to ask you to take a look at the poll and just answer those couple of questions. I have 4 questions in all there. Somebody needs to mute their video because I'm hearing feedback. So if everyone can mute, that would be, oh, great, you did. Terrific. So if you can see the questions, if you'll go ahead and respond to the poll, it gives me a little information about who's in my audience and how many of you have been trained, when, and how you're working so far. So we'll just take a couple of minutes to let that come in. This is a nice feature of Zoom where it tabulates everything. I'm so glad I'm not counting. Just give you another few, maybe 30 seconds to respond so we don't take up all our time in polling. Got a nice overview here with a good 79% of you have now voted, so we're getting close. Wow, 86 of you have now voted. That's great. So I'm going to go ahead and end polling at this time and see what our tally is. So it looks like the vast majority of you here at 33%, a third of you, have been trained in EMDR for more than 2 years. That's fabulous. Glad to hear that. And then there's a much smaller percent that it's been less than 1 year. So what a year to break in, huh? How confident are you in your EMDR skills, 1 to 10? And we've got a good chunk of you right there in the middle, feeling moderately comfortable, a few of you not feeling comfortable at all. And we've got the biggest chunk right there at the 8. Very nice. Good work, guys. How many clients have worked with the EMDR therapy, have you worked with in the EMDR therapy approach? So biggest chunk there is maybe 5 to 10 clients. And then we've got a few of you that can't count how many folks you've worked with. So I should share results with you. Sorry, I skipped a step. So how many clients have you used all 3 prongs and 8 phases? Looks like about a fourth of you. No, I have to get closer to see. Looks like half of you have done everything, including the future template. And that is terrific. As I talk to other trainers around the country and really the world, what we find is people often forget that future template. So that's great. Glad to hear it. Some of you have done none in that area. And some of you have done 5 to 10 or 10 or more. That's great. Terrific. Thanks for letting me know who you are, who's in the room here. Let's see if I can get out of polling. There we go. Learning how to use all this stuff on Zoom. Getting ready to do the part 2 of my training that I offered in March, starting the end of this month. And I'll be having to do all of this stuff. I won't have Lindsay monitoring chat then either, which is a drag. So I'll have to figure out how I'm going to do that. So let's talk about those 8 phases. Now, you guys all remember this from when you were in our work together, or your work with your trainers, or when you sit in your office with your clients, that phase 1 is history. And in history, we do things a little bit differently. We're going to talk in greater depth about that. Phase 2, preparation. Generally, many of you know I kind of roll 1 and 2 together. That's the way that I work personally. Phase 3 is assessment. We never start assessment without going where? Straight into phase 4, desensitization. Phase 4 leads us to phase 5, installation of the positive cognition. Phase 6, the body scan, that double check that's so essential in EMDR. And then we close out, incomplete or complete session. We want to make sure the client can leave our office safe, grounded, able to function. And then we ask them to give us some feedback as they come into phase 8, our reevaluation. So checking, double checking, double checking, on and on, making sure they've cleared out those targets. We're going to talk a little bit about those phases. We've got the 3 prongs. We use all 3 prongs when looking at the past and the present. Now, how about that? I wrote those in reverse order. Should be past, present, and future. Sorry about that. So we use all 3 prongs here. We're going to use all 8 phases for the past and the present. The future has its own template, as you know. The past manifests itself in the present moment. So we want to work with the past, pulling out that splinter or that log that laid down things in the beginning, and then moving forward to the present triggers, and then helping us plan for the future, see where we're going to go. So using the basic protocol, helping the client get through things, helping them access their memory networks, which are stored state specific, as you know, and moving forward and processing those memories through phases 3 through 7. So how are we going to manage that here and now? We know that history taking is going to be creating that roadmap. It's going to be telling us where are we going. We're going to develop our treatment plan. We're going to gather that history, carefully attuned to the client, and knowing when we want to make smaller chunks. We want to know also in history taking, is it overwhelming to the client to gather that history? Do we need to do some resource development right now, plugging it in so that they're prepared, so that they have everything they need to do all 8 phases? But in particular, we want to move to phase 2 with that preparation work to make sure they're prepared to be able to do the processing work of 3 through 7. We want to make sure that they've got bilateral stimulation. We're going to talk today about how do you provide bilateral stimulation so that you've got the dual awareness with your client when they're out there like you guys are for me right now. How will we provide that? And then what's our process in preparation that helps our client know about ways to emotionally regulate? Most commonly, of course, we use that therapeutic container and the idea of a calm scene or a happy scene. That's our kind of go-to sweet spot, if you will. For some clients, as you know, we need some additional tools because those are less effective for them. And we're not leaving out the trustworthy, safe relationship. That's always important. We want to make sure that the client is able to stay within the window of tolerance when we get into that processing. Remember this slide or one like it, where we look at that hyper arousal so that we're in this area to be able to really do processing. And when they flop down here, they play dead, right? They're numb, they're out of it. They can't access the material anymore. They're overwhelmed. Or if they get up here, they're in that hyper arousal phase. They're over aroused. They cannot process here. But what we find, the optimal arousal zone is in that level, but at the top end. So when they're here and they're really feeling it, but they're not overdone, or they haven't gotten so overwhelmed at this top end that they flop out, then we're able to do the processing work. I'm sure that's what you've seen with your clients, that they're able to work best when they're in that level. And that sometimes ends up being a process of helping them by titrating the material. Excuse me. You know that I call these the 7 magic questions. When we enter phase 3, we want to be prepared to move directly into phase 4, desensitization. You don't start this unless you're ready to go. You're firing that first bullet, you want to keep going. So what are those questions? Tell me what the worst picture is that represents this target, this incident, this memory that we're working on. And what's your negative belief about yourself when you look at that picture? What would you like to believe about yourself instead when you look at that picture? Instead of that negative belief, how can we transform that? How can we come up with a new way to view yourself? And how true is it to you now as you look at that picture on a scale of 1 to 7? How true is it now for you to say, I am okay, or I did the best I could? How true is that? 1 to 7, 7 being the most true. And then what emotions come up as you think about the picture, which represents the worst aspect, the negative belief about self? What emotions do you feel? What's coming up for you right now? Then we scale that with the SUD scale, the subjective units of disturbance, and we ask 0 to 10, how disturbing is that to you now? When we talked in history about this incident, it may not have been, and should not have been in history gathering, the most overwhelming conversation. Now we're entering in state specific, lighting up that memory network, and we want it to be activated. So we do expect a SUDS level here to be much higher than we would expect in previous conversations. And then we ask them to look in, when they look at that picture, when they consider that negative belief about self and they notice those emotions, what do they feel in their body? So now we've got all of the aspects of the trauma linked together. We ask them to bring up that picture, the negative belief, the emotions, and the body sensations, and we hit phase 4, desensitization. So we want to take that target, elevated, intense experience of that in the negative neural networks, and we want to process that experience down to a 0 from wherever we've started. So we want an adaptive resolution. We want to make sure that all the channels related, so you remember this with the channels that might be related, the generalizable effect when we do processing work, that you might have this target and then this one and this one and this one and this one that are all related. You may find the opportunity for them to get all of those down to a 0. You want that spontaneous emergence in standard protocol of all of the different channels and the sensations and thoughts and memories and ideas related to that. And let's not forget, in part 2, most of you, the way that my training is structured and most trainings are structured, you get a lot more work on interweaves there when you have stuck or you have looping responses from your clients in that check-in time. So interweaves are that possibility to open up that blocked processing. Remember the idea of the train on the train track, and we're going along and you just let whatever happens, happens. And then there's this little piece of the train track that might be missing for somebody. That's when you start using those interweaves. You as the therapist are now able to step in and try to help the client by fixing that little bit of train track, getting out of their way as soon as possible and returning to the target to do the processing through. Once you've achieved that 0 on a SUDS, in phase 4, you move into phase 5, installation of positive cognition. Okay, I'm going to stop and take a breath because I realize I'm talking pretty fast. I get on a roll and I talk pretty fast. If you're not able to keep up with me and you want to raise your hand and let Lindsay know, if some of you are feeling like I'm talking too fast, she'll let me know that I really need to slow down again. Those of you who had me in grad school, I know some of you are out there that I taught, you know, this is me. I get excited, I get going. I've been working hard on slowing down my speech, but it's more natural to me. So now let's talk about a review of phase 5. In phase 5, we want to increase those connections to the positive belief about self. So we're going to continue processing work, right? So we're going to continue the bilateral stimulation here fast. We've only used slow in preparation, phase 2. We've moved through desensitization and now installation with fast bilateral stimulation, not slow. Slow is only for the development of resources in that preparation phase. So we're going to install the positive belief, and we want this positive belief about self to be generalizable with other associated memories. And we want to make sure as we step into phase 5 that we check in with our client. Earlier, you said what you'd like to believe is blah, blah, blah. Is that true now, or are there other words that would be more true for you now? You want to enhance that with bilateral stimulation, trying to get some movement from that positive belief up to a 7 on the VOC score. Phase 6, once you have that 0 SUDS, 7 VOC, then you move into phase 6, body scan, completing the disturbance. You want to clear the disturbance in the body so that you've got that double check. You've checked what are they seeing and how do they feel about it. You check what do they believe about themselves. Then you check where is that memory stored in their body, because as we know, memories are stored all over the place. So we want to get to all of them in our processing. We want to make sure that any residual physical sensations are addressed. So we're still bilateral stimulation, still fast, still moving with our client. And then at the end of a session, you want to make sure that they're stable. You want to know that your client's walking out the room, stable, ready to go back to the rest of their life. We've been dealing with old stuff, and we want to be able to move through that old stuff. We want to use guided imagery or other types of emotional regulation techniques with an incomplete session. We want to make sure that folks are able to manage their feelings in between sessions by providing them the TICES log. Remember, triggers, images, cognitions, emotions, and sensations. The TICES log, which is in your text in Francine Shapiro's 3rd edition, the TICES log is recommended to the client so the client can kind of keep track of what happened, kind of learn a little bit about themselves throughout the week in a way that they can then tell you about when they come back into session. And as many of you know, my experience of that was I forgot to use the TICES log after my initial training, had lots of in-between phone calls from clients. Then I had the opportunity to remember the TICES log, started giving it to my clients, and much less breakthrough for clients in between when they're able to use that also as a container for them. So I'm telling Carol when I come back in, these things happened. I make myself a little note, and that helps me feel like I've got that process taken care of. So I know what's going on. So then with an incomplete session or a complete session, they can come back in and tell us about things. We're going to check in phase 8, how did things go? Did we get everything last time? Is there more work we need to do? Or have we completed that target? Are there other associated targets that either have had a generalization effect and we can install that, or maybe we need to turn to try to work on those things? So we want to evaluate how have things come together in terms of their beliefs and their responses. How has that all come together and the neurons have fired and wired together so that there's a change that rolls out to them for the future or other areas of their lives. And as I always say, the relationship is the vehicle for change. So you want to trust the importance of the relationship. You want to have that relationship with your client. That's a key part of psychotherapy. We know that weighs out more than any type of modality we're using. But I can also say with the Emdr, you want to trust the process. It's a very resilient process. I've shared with most of you. I make lots of mistakes. When I make the mistakes, the process of EMDR therapy is resilient enough to be able to work through them with me and my client. So trust the process and the relationship. And I want to remind you, especially those who are newer to EMDR or got trained a while back and haven't used it much, processing trauma doesn't mean talking about it. It means you're going to set up a learning state where experiences that are causing problems can get properly digested and then stored in the right place in your brain. you know, your brain prunes off stuff it doesn't need. It doesn't need that hyper reactivity. It doesn't need that intense negative belief about self. It can prune those off. What we want you to keep when you work through things, or we want our clients to keep, is those things that are most useful to us. We want them stored with the appropriate emotions so that those things can become tools to help guide us positive ways in the future. We want folks to move forward. Now, how are we going to do all of that? Virtually. Before I move to that, I'm going to let you take a moment. Are there any questions about standard protocol? Anybody want to speak up now and say, well, wait, you went so fast on whatever slide, I don't remember that, or what's a Tyses log, or do you have any questions for me here? You can share those in chat. I'm going to take a look at chat real quick and see if there's anything there. Nothing's coming in.
We've received one question so far.
Okay.
And from Rita, she said that there's lots of information online showing that people can self-administer EMDR. In your experience, what are the cons about clients doing the procedure on their own?
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks, Rita. That's a great question. So if you go to the emdr.org website, one of the things you're going to see is therapy involves a therapist. So it's not DIY. And there are folks who are advertising, there are these wrist things that you can put on that people say are good for your kids for ADHD or anxiety. There are videos that you can watch to do your own EMDR. I would not recommend that to people to work on trauma. I absolutely would tell anyone, don't work on trauma by yourself. The process of going through the trauma was solitary for most of us. Very few traumas occur where we feel like there's somebody there with us. And the process of just having someone there, witnessing, validating, being with you is transformational. We all know that from the type of therapy that we've done for years before we learned EMDR. So it's really, this is not a process that I think is going to work best in that type of setting. I think it is really important to try to, touch points is exactly the one I'm talking about, the wrist devices. I think they do work in conjunction with a therapist. So DIY, no, but using those at home with your therapist may be a tool that's going to be effective for you. I'm a little bit of a controlling kind of person, I guess, or therapist, and I'm not really comfortable giving those to my client to work with. And I have found other means, even with the clients that I've been doing tactile BLS with, those folks, I'm not telling them to go out and buy the touch points. I'm not telling them to go out and do their own trauma work. Now, we've all been trained to use the butterfly hug, right? The butterfly hug is effective on your own for resource development. So certainly you can use the butterfly hug fast for processing. I call that the fast butterfly and the other the slow butterfly. So you can use those things, but I think it is very important that we tell our clients, we tell our friends, we tell our Facebook world not to DIY psychotherapy with trauma. I think it's really, really scary. And I'm also on some of the, I'm on like every Facebook group right now. I'm starting to wean myself off of some of those because when the pandemic hit, I wanted to kind of find out for myself things that I needed to learn, as well as I wanted to monitor what was going on. And so I popped up more. I usually lurk. I just sort of am in the background looking at things, but I popped up more recently because of my Emdr hat and trying to say, we have guidelines for this. We have reasons for that. And I'm trying to make sure that folks who are not a part of Emdr are aware of the importance of consideration here. The guidelines for telehealth include a therapist. They're not DIY. They're not do it on your own. Now, I remember at one point, this is many, many years ago, I remember dating somebody and I had gone into therapy for myself. I was depressed in my 20s and I went to see a therapist. I remember going on this date with this guy I've been seeing for a while, and he said, why do you need a therapist? You could just talk to me. Well, that was the end of that relationship, because as a therapist, I knew there was more to it than that. There were some other problems, but we won't go into that right now. But I felt like people don't all know. So I think it's important to spread this information because people get hurt and they get left really alone. So I really want to discourage DIY therapy, except for the development of positive resources. So in that area, you know, you go to yoga and you learn things that way, and that's great. And you can spend time journaling and getting to know yourself better. But opening up old traumas that have gotten stuck in your psyche, no. You want somebody there to hold your hand, figuratively in this case, but you want somebody there with you. So let's take another moment to switch gears here and let's start talking about the virtual world. So I am going to find the second poll. How do I do that? Okay, so I stop that. And now I want to go to the second poll. There we go. All right, now I figured it out. And I'm going to launch polling and ask you to take a few moments now, take a break from me talking, and tell me how much you know about telemedicine and what you think it's going to be like to do EMDR on video. Ooh, you guys are getting fast now. %73 in. Give you another couple of seconds. So I'm going to end polling. Thanks for your efforts there. Wow, look at that. Most of you are on a teleconference platform. That's great. We're going to talk about which platforms and why a little bit. Some of you are just doing phone or face-to-face, 4 of you. And some of you really don't want to do technology at all. Gotcha there. But we got a good 86% who are already working successfully, I suspect, with their teleconferencing platform. And some of you think it's going to be really fun, the majority. So kudos to you. Glad to hear it. Some of you are scared. I'm glad you're here. Let's hold your hand and help you feel better about it. Some of you are really worried about how hard it is. In fact, I think that's totally true that we have times where it is hard. You know, if you notice me sitting here trying to figure out how to do things, trying to see the right button to push, sometimes I zoom up into the camera like this. I had one client when I was switching from one thing to another. I have 2 screens set up here. And I was switching from one thing to another with my client. And all of a sudden I hear him cracking up laughing. Well, apparently I had gone up here and was making really weird faces. So at least he and I could both have a laugh at that point. You know, interesting. I'm just thinking about that client. And one of the things that's happened as a result of our work together in this format, he's a guy who had some trauma in the military. We worked on that. He didn't quite get through everything, but he wanted to quit. He got married, had a baby since I've seen him. And after the baby became a toddler, he started really struggling with some triggers related to that child. And we've come up on that work. He's doing really great work with EMDR on this platform, on virtual. But he laughs a lot more than he ever did in my office. And he looks at me more than he ever did in my office. I think he feels safer. I think it's a piece for him that seems important. We had a great session this week where he was sitting outside of his shed. He'd been in his shed before, but he was outside of his shed and talking to me. So that was pretty cool. Thanks for the poll. Let's move on to the next slide. Here we go. All right. So here we are in the new normal. I first heard that phrase after Katrina, and I imagine many of you as well. But now we've got another normal. So first of all, just take it down a notch. Quit worrying so much. This is new to you and your client. You guys are learning together. We've mostly been forced into this. I was forced into this, and I guess you were too. And we want to really work on resourcing. I've spent a lot of time doing the butterfly hug with my clients. It feels good to me. It feels good to them. And so we work together on this piece. The clients are my teachers. I'm not hiring them to teach me or requiring them to teach me. I'm doing a lot of work to figure out what are the right things to do here. And I am open to learning from them. And if rapport was already established in your office, it doesn't go away online. It's still there. And people are glad to see you just as you're glad to see them. And you find out things about your client that you didn't know before. I have one client that I've worked with quite a while who's always referred to this room in her house as an important room for her in many positive ways. That's the room we're meeting in now. So that really enhances her sense of safety and security being in her room when she meets with me. And you want to consider that if your last in-person session with the client was in the middle of processing, maybe your next session isn't going to be right back into phase 4. You may want to go back into phase 2, developing resources. Many clients are anxious about doing therapy in this way. So we spend some time just processing the anxiety. Remember, you can process the anxiety about doing therapy. So that's where we've been, working right there on decreasing the SUDs related to their anxiety about doing any kind of work in this format. And doing that has been really wonderful because a lot of glitches happen. If you're not having glitches, you're not online. So we've been able to, one client in particular with whom I'm working adjunctively with another therapist is her primary therapist. We're doing trauma work. So she sees me and it's sort of like Pavlov's dog response. Oh, it's going to be bad. It's going to be that horrible stuff. And so we have done a lot of work around calming that anxiety down. And in that process, we've had frozen screens. I've had to call her. The computer turns off all the way. Just different things that have come up for her, trying to figure out what room to be in where she has privacy and a sense of security. She's been in several different rooms. Managing those pieces, you may need to, the real world has an impact on our work, and you may need to work on the present with your client. It gives you a sense of what it's like to do this here. It gives them a sense of what it's like to do this here. So the new normal, eye contact looks different, right? So I have my screen. I have a little screen that is me, that is positioned right underneath my camera. With my clients, I will pin the video so that I'm looking at them on a bigger screen. I make that as big as possible. They're the center of my screen and I get rid of me. I don't want to look at what's going on with me. I want to look at them and I want the eye contact to be aimed at them as much as possible. I also don't want to put them under the gun of feeling like they're being stared at. So be natural. You know, if you look away, you look away. You look back, you do that in your office. It's okay. You don't want to have, I do have a bit of an intense stare perhaps, but you want to try to mitigate that with some. So I'm often taking notes in a session. I look kind of like this to the client. So that's all right. You want to make sure that they've got some of those pieces of you that they had in your office. And you want to make sure that some of those nonverbal clues are there for the client. And they can't pick up on all of the clues. So if I was in my office and I was crossing my legs, I might be able to cross my legs right now and you just see a slight shift in my chair. But in my office, they might have seen that as me being defensive or me moving away from them. If I do this motion, I did buy a new chair once I had to sit in front of the screen all the day because I didn't have a good chair. I would certainly highly recommend a good chair to sit in because otherwise I was wiggle, wiggle, wiggle all day trying to get comfortable. So there are these nonverbal clues that come up and you want to make sure that you are able to express things in a way that helps them feel comfortable. You want to make sure that their face and their posture is available to you. So you may need to coach them about how to position their camera. So when there's a big flood of light coming in behind someone, you can't see their face. I have my camera positioned with lights behind it so that my face is lit up so that they can see me. And I may need to ask them to position themselves, particularly if I want to see eye movements. I may ask them to try to figure out a way to get in a position where they're not flooded with light behind them. You also want to help coach them with things like, what's their setup? What's their background? How many of you may, or many of you may have seen your clients now on video in their bed, right? Not an unusual place for people to show up. Had folks in their bed, in their car, on the floor, in the closet, in the attic, a lot of different places, people trying to find privacy, trying to find a way to be able to connect with you. But they may be in a situation where you're seeing things they don't really want you to see and you don't really want to see. You know, if they've got their dirty clothes in a pile that you can see clearly, you may want to say, hey, just want to let you know, as you have your camera there, I can see some aspects of your room that maybe it would be okay for you to relocate. Is there some kind of private information that you might want to consider I'm seeing? Look at you in your screen. How do you see yourself? Is that what you want me to see? Are there other distractions getting in the way? How many people have had sessions now with dogs, right? Or cats? I have one client who has these two cats that she has a couch. She sits on the floor on the couch behind her. The cats jump up on the window. This week they actually ran across her because they were playing chase. That's fine. It was really very grounding for her. There was one point at which the tail of the cat was on the couch and the tail was coming out from her head. I just started laughing. And I said, I'll call her Jane. Jane, right now there's a tail that is exiting basically your ear in this picture. And we laughed together, and she loves her cats, and she loved me being connected to her cats. Another aspect of developing a relationship. So you want to be able to see them clearly enough to be able to tune in, but not be too intrusive. You want to take your time here in the preparation phase. You want to both feel comfortable. You want to make sure that your background is what you want to show. Are you showing them what you want to see? Because I'm doing a lot of trainings, I've actually spent a fair amount of time staging this area behind me. I made my husband come in and paint those cabinets because they were dark and I didn't like them. I moved around things that are up there. It's still not perfectly clean, but it is less annoying. I had a few friends look at it with me and make decisions. For your viewing pleasure, I have plants in here since I normally don't have plants in here because I kill them. I thought, well, that'll warm up the stage a little bit. So I consider this a stage when I'm speaking. So you want to look at the stage that you're presenting with your clients. Is this the view of you that you want them to have? And you want to make sure that they're able to have the privacy that they need. Gesundheit. Janine, you need to mute.
Oh my God.
No problems. Everybody just check for a moment, see if you're on mute, because otherwise we'll hear when the dog barks or the mailman comes. We are going to do a exercise later where we go into the breakout rooms. And before that, we'll talk about how to pin the video so you just see your client and you're not having to look at yourself and go back and forth in speaker view, or that 2-on-1 page where you're looking sideways the whole time. And so you look like you're not connected to them when you're trying to talk to them. So you really want to empower your client there in the beginning and make sure that they're able to feel safe. Again, everybody please mute. Safety plans. Have a sheet with your client from the very beginning. So I have a pad of paper here on my desk, and right here on my desk, I'm going to make sure that I have the client's phone number, where they are, what's their location, emergency contacts. Every note has that on that page. So I don't have to go back and fumble through the chart to find out where is that information. I've got it right away if there is an emergency. Some of us work with folks who are really, really struggling, and they may need some extreme help. So you want to make sure that you've got emergency contacts. So you're going to have a contact conversation with your client, right? If there were a situation where our phone lines went dead and it was an intense moment and I was worried about you and I can't get you to answer your phone, maybe your phone wasn't properly charged, is there a way for me to reach out to someone else? Is there somebody else that we need to get in contact with? What are the emergency numbers in their location? Some of you are working with people that are outside of your city. What are the emergency numbers there? I had the occasion years ago to work with somebody who was in Tangipahoa Parish. That day I was in Orleans Parish, and when you dial 911 on your phone, they put you into the parish that you're located in. So I got Orleans Parish, who then gave me the phone number for Tangipahoa Parish. So then I reached out to Tangipahoa Parish. It was like, took a lot of steps to get me through to that place. And you want to make sure that when you've got video conferencing set up, that you've got phone contact as well. I don't mean you always are on the phone during the video, but sometimes that's going to be the most effective way to keep you present, because they can, oh, I'm sorry, I switched gears, accidental click. So if they have you on their earbuds, so I always have my earbuds sitting right here, ready to go. They have you in their ears. They may feel better connected to you. They may like that. They can plug that into their laptop or their computer, or you can call them and mute yourself on the video to talk with them. If there's some sort of a lag time, you want to make sure you have it right there, and you want to make sure they know that's the plan. So my information, my consent for telemedicine that I send to them says that. I go over that again when we first start meeting, and frequently I've had to use that. We also want to notice that getting started with folks, first-time clients, you're going to need to have all of that information and work on those pieces, but also trust building might be slower. You may need to go a little more gently into the conversation. You may want to develop titrated or graduated targets. You want to closely monitor their SUDS. And remember, you're not supposed to check SUDS every 5 minutes with folks unless you're doing EMD. So when you go back to target, you go back to target, you go back to target, and you check SUDS. If you haven't learned EMD, that might be a good thing for us to work on with you in your consult hours, because that decreases the generalization effect, but can be a good way to start out as you're learning this client when you're first meeting them. You want to check ego states, which you would be doing in your office. Are they so far back into the trauma that they're now 5 years old? And what's that going to be like for them? You want to make sure that they're stable enough to do the work. And you want to make sure that there's plenty enough time in your session to do what you need to do. You want to make sure you've got those follow-up instructions. Here's the Tyses log. You want to make sure they understand once the brain is activated, it may continue to work in dreams or in the daytime on other images. Remind them about using their container throughout the week or time frame from when you're going to see them again. And you may want to give them some kind of homework that's actually emphasizing that positive cognition that they're working through. You want to manage as best as you can, if you're doing processing work, that you've clearly got someone who's engaged and going to continue and keep working. You may need to reach out more in this context than you've done previously in your office in order to keep that consistent follow-up. In the preparation stage, I've talked already about the importance of making sure you've got the backup. So there's you on video, you on phone, and is there somebody else that maybe you need to reach out to? So getting that in play. You want to make sure you've got the suicide hotlines and other crisis services. You may want to call them first to make sure of how they're working, because in some, this is information that I got from a national service, and sometimes the processes are changed during COVID. So you want to find out about what agencies are available and how your folks can access that information. You want to make sure also, if this is a client who reveals to you that they are suicidal, that you've got a good suicide prevention plan with them, and that you can, and that's one of the nice things about this, right? You can share your screen, as I'm doing right now. You can share the plan with them. Now, there isn't anything magical about sharing a plan or having a suicide contract. We know that, but it is a good way to channel the conversation between you and your client. And this is one that was developed, I believe, in Canada through Beyond Blue there. It's on their website that you can use, that can help you to co-create a suicide plan if your client is struggling with suicide. So I'm going to pause for a moment and take any questions there might be. I'm going to look at chat. See, there's some conversation. So I see some folks here that are worried about clients getting into panic. and not being able to get back to baseline. So when you have titrated the process of working with clients and you have developed things slowly and you're working towards how do we decrease anxiety, they've practiced the resources, you know what their resources are, and you work with them around those, then as they get into over accessing, slipping out of the top end of the window of tolerance, you have a lot of tools that you can cue them for. And one of them is to bring them back into the present. Name 5 things in the room. We're going to talk some about some of Jim Knight's tools that are talked about usually in a part 2 training with dissociation and how to work with those folks. So I'm coming around to that a little bit later in our conversation. I'll go into some more depth about it. Somebody says that they have a client who meets in the bathroom to try to get safety and privacy. I have a client who meets with me in the bathroom. He meets at his wife's vanity. He was very careful to tell me it wasn't going to be on the toilet. But he meets in the part where she would put makeup on with a big mirror, and we're able to meet there. It's kind of interesting because behind him is a clock, and the clock, I get to watch the time too, which is a little harder here. I have a clock that I've set up right here in arm's length so that I can watch the clock. We'll talk some about those things that I can no longer provide to my clients, but there we are. Let me see if I missed anything else here in the chat that might be useful. Okay, so some people are saying I didn't think it would work, but it does work. Agreed. So we're getting ready to take a break. I've been talking now for, oh lordy, for a while. And if there aren't any further questions right now, then I want to point you to this poster, which I saw in another webinar. Jamie Marish, who is an EMDR trainer, had this in a webinar, and I loved it. So I looked for it online, and lo and behold, there it was. So there are a lot of different ways to take a break. But what we're going to do today is we're going to have a 10-minute break. And in that break, I'm going to invite you to do some yoga stretching that I do every day now that I'm sitting at a desk. So I told you I got a good comfy chair, but I still need those stretches. So what we're going to do is I have on the PowerPoint, you'll see where it's located. I use Sarah Beth's 5 minutes. So we're going to do 5 minutes of stretching with the yoga, and then we're going to do 5 minutes on our own. So pee break, coffee break, whatever it is that you need to take. And let's see if I can get this to work. It worked earlier, so hold your breath.
Welcome to the Desk Yoga Series. My name is Sarah Beth, and we'll begin this posture routine standing behind our desks. So join me with your feet a little bit wider than hip distance. Reach your arms overhead as if you were taking a big, long body stretch. Then grab onto your left wrist, turn your left palm up, dive over to your right as you lengthen your whole left side body from your left heel pushing down to your left hand reaching up. No need to shrug your shoulders. Just breathe into the space that you're creating. And then we'll switch sides. Grab onto your right wrist, turn your right palm up, dive into your left side as you lengthen your right side body. Keep weight anchoring down into your right heel. Then come back to center. Release your hands down by your side. And turn to face the back of your chair or something that you can grab onto for a little bit of stability. Bend your right knee, reach back with your right hand and grab onto the inner arch of your right foot. So your right palm is open and your thumb is pointing back. Keep your knees together and keep your breath smooth in and out through your nose as you feel tension releasing from your right quad and the right hip flexor. Now you're welcome to stay standing just like this, or turn this into a supported dancer just by hinging into your hips as you kick your right foot into your right hand. And as you do so, your chest will start to lean forward, your toes will reach up, and you'll feel your right chest open up. Then mindfully release. Place your right foot back down, and we'll switch sides. Reach your left hand back, grab onto the inner arch of your left foot. Again, left palm is open, left thumb is pointing back. As you stand upright here, keep your knees together. Deepen your breath in and out through your nose. If you went for the supported dancer variation on the other side, make sure you do so here as well. Kick your left foot into your left hand so your left shoulder begins to roll open, your left toes begin to reach up. And gentle release. Come back to your chair to take a seat and sit on the edge of your chair so you have plenty of space to sit upright, feet can ground down evenly. With your hands on your knees, pull your heart forward, lift your chin up, take a big breath in. This is a seated cow pose. As you breathe out, tuck your chin, round your spine, cave your chest, and this is called a seated cat back. So inhale to that seated cow, heart pulls forward, belly opens, chest opens, chin lifts up. Exhale to your seated cat, cave everything, tuck and round. So just keep it going with your breath, maybe a couple more times. Come back to center. Sitting up tall, place your right hand behind you on your chair. Place your left hand on your right knee. Follow this gentle twist to the right as if you were looking for someone behind you, so you're even turning through your chin and your eyes. And there's no need to force within this twist. It's already happening, so just breathe. And notice how your breath is massaging all the muscles in your upper back, your chest, neck, and anywhere else that you feel it. Gently come back to center to switch sides. Place your left hand behind you, sitting up tall. Right hand reaches across, grabbing onto your left knee. Stay tall through the crown of your head, shoulders soft. Turn all the way through your chin, even through your gaze, so you can feel that slight stretch in your eyes. And keep your breath calm and deep, in and out through your nose. Gently come back to center, then feel free to add any other shoulder rolls or movement that might serve you. And that's it for our posture routine. Make sure you check out the rest of the desk yoga series, including videos for wrist health, hips and lower back, neck and shoulder tension, and a grounding mental exercise. All of these are short routines that can be done throughout your workday.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Come get settled back into wherever it is you're joining me today. Just for a minute or so, can I get some feedback around the yoga video? Can I get a thumbs up if you tried it? So let's see. Can I even see thumbs up? Where would I see that at? So Lindsay, can you tell me if there are any thumbs going up for people who tried the video?
Yep, I see quite a few thumbs up. Tiffany, Nancy, Pamela, Elizabeth, just
All
a
right,
few of
good,
the folks. Yeah.
good. So of those who tried it out, what's it like for you to take that little 5-minute break? Is that a thumbs up or don't respond? So are there as many folks saying they really liked it? Some folks, I don't know how to ask this question. That is my problem here. I'll just say thank you. I'm glad you tried it. I found it as a result of a colleague, friend, Karen Slayton, who's a psychologist at the VA. She suggested that I use it. So that was pretty exciting. Oh, I see someone has raised their hand. Lindsay, can you help with the person who's raised their hand? Apparently I get a little raised hand over on this side. I don't know what that means. I did find out yesterday when I was doing another training that sometimes people hit the raised hand by accident. So if you do have a question, if you'll go ahead and maybe put it in chat, Lindsay will be better able to monitor that. So doing the 5-minute video with this lovely young pregnant woman is really fun for me. And I just do it in between sessions. And when I don't do it, I feel it. So if I have a day where I've just decided, oh, it was more important for me to look at my email or do something else, I pay for it later. So it's not really a good choice for me. And I wanted to share it with you as an example. Those of you who didn't try it, no problems. You can try it at another time if you'd like, but I would like to at least encourage everybody to look at how they schedule their clients. So typically I used to schedule my clients in pretty much increments with a 10-minute break. So if I had a 90-minute session, I had a 10-minute break. If I had a 50-minute session, I had a 10-minute break, 45, whatever. But I found that sessions take a little bit longer to organize online. So most of my sessions now are either 90 minutes or 60 minutes. So I do, for processing work, I prefer to do 90 minutes when I can. With adults, I work, those of you who don't know me, I work primarily with adults and teens. I don't work with children. Children can do shorter sessions better, teens too. But with adults, I usually work with them for this longer period of time if we're going to do some processing. And I found that if I didn't have a 15-minute break after I did those sessions, that I had a hard time. First of all, I couldn't keep up with everything I was trying to keep up with in the first month of the pandemic because of our work with Emdr and trying to help clients access the concepts of doing virtual therapy, et cetera. So many pieces, parts of just trying to figure out how this is going to work for me and how it's going to work for them. So I've tried to make sure I schedule my sessions now on quarter-hour increments, which makes me crazy because I like everything to be nice and clean and orderly, but it's not working. So let's take a minute now and shift back into polling. Here we are again. One more poll. Let's see, how do I get to the third poll? And launch polling. Tell me a little bit about what you got going on so far in using online EMDR. What video platform are you using? And how are you going to handle those glitches I was talking about? Let me give you a couple of minutes to do that. Couple of seconds left at 72% now. Those of you who are saying other, if you want to go into chat and say what your other is, that would be great. I'd like to know about it. So Ring X, huh, Carol? I've never heard of that one. I don't know Ring Centrals either. Did I not put Zoom in? Okay, I only have Zoom healthcare plan. So I guess, Trevor, you're talking about a regular Zoom. BetterHelp, also one I haven't heard of. Rebecca, you're using Zoom, got it. So let me end polling and share our results. So if you'll notice, there are a lot of people here who use a Zoom healthcare plan. I think I meant to just put Zoom there, so sorry about that. Oh, somebody's doing, wow, I just made this huge. Somebody's doing, oh, Chris, hey, my Clients Plus is a service. Theranest has one, yeah, I was familiar with that. So I use Secure Video, and Secure Video takes me to Zoom, and they had closed their doors. So I don't know if they've reopened yet, but that is another possibility. Life size for residential, great. So what backups do you use? Phone and video, most of you. In the meeting and reschedule, just one. But everybody else wants to keep going and try, either with phone or video or both. Thanks. Anybody want to cry? No, nobody's crying. That's good. So let me get out of this screen. And thanks for sharing all that information with us about all the other sites. All of them have problems. So I don't think it's possible for you to say, yeah, mine always works. So there's a question here about using FaceTime. Currently, FaceTime is acceptable because the HIPAA rules have been waived. After the pandemic, you know, that light at the end of the tunnel, I don't know what's going to happen with HIPAA and how the rules are going to go, but currently FaceTime would not work. And it does, for some clients, that's all they're willing to use. Thanks, Nancy, for pointing that out. So if the clients are only willing to use FaceTime, that's certainly something you can try. I've been able to, one by one, talk all of my clients into the process that I'm using. Secure Video goes through a second step that's a little bit different than Zoom. So they get an invite from Secure Video. It takes them into a waiting room. The waiting room is handy to have in case you're not there. It also gives them a button. Once you select that, it gives them a button for them to pay. I think Simple Practice does that, and some of the other groups. So it's handy to have a video platform that does those things. I think that most of us prefer to have whatever is the cheapest version, right? Whatever works and is the least expensive way, if your agency is paying for it or you're paying for it. So that's a big consideration. I'm glad to hear that nobody wants to just cry and that you're still giving a good solid shot at trying to stay connected to your clients. So what are the basics for virtual? The basics are for you and your client to both have a stable intranet. Now, I know that's not always happening. It's not happening for me with my client on the phone in the car either. Totally get that. But the very best choice is to have it plugged into the Ethernet. Somehow you have that adapter. I don't know how any of that works, right? Mine is plugged into the wall. When my client is also plugged into the wall and they're on a PC or a Mac, it works the best. There's less lag time. So that time period where they're following a light, perhaps, I'm going to show you that in a minute, but they're following the light, but their eyes are over here because the ball's not moving for them because there's a lag time. So those pieces work best when you're plugged in. Even then, they're going to be glitches. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, that idea of an uninterrupted location for the client. I have a couple of clients who are able to use their laptop or their computer. They put their phone on a sound machine. They put it outside the door. But if they do that and I have to call them, then it interrupts that process. So that's a drawback to that piece, but it just depends. A young man I was working with who was really concerned about saying negative things about his father, and he was at his parents' house. So that was a concern. You want to make sure that you have really checked your tools before you get started. This is not one of those situations that works very well to wing it. Some of us are more wing it people than others, but you want to make sure your computer is working. You want to make sure you've got lighting, as I mentioned earlier, so that they can see you and hopefully you're going to be able to see them. And you want to have a microphone. An external mic makes a big difference. I have this one that a colleague of mine, so I'm going to move my camera to show you. This is a Jabra, is what it's called. It made a huge difference for me. The first couple of weeks I was practicing, I was using the computer system for talking, and I was really having to project, which I can do. Those of you who've seen me in a classroom know I can get it back to the back of the room, but at the end of the day, my throat was killing me. I was also in the beginning of the process recovering from some sort of viral infection, perhaps COVID, I don't know. I didn't get tested. At that point, it was only available to get tested under certain circumstances, and I didn't meet those criteria, nor did I want to go into the emergency room and have something stuck down my throat through my nose. So, so I wasn't sure, was it just my throat or was it something going on with the microphone? The microphone that I have, some people are asking, it's a Jabra 410, Jabra, speaker 410. There's one that is set up for Bluetooth, which is 130, and this was like 80 or something. And I went for the cheaper. I wish I had gotten the Bluetooth, just FYI. But it's yeah, that's it. Thanks, Kara. Jabra 410. So you want to make sure that you've got that set up so that you can talk all day. And you want to make sure you got their contact information. Talked about that already. Headphones. Some people like those headphones that are like this, you know, with the big coverings for their ears. I should probably put pictures in here. And then I have the little earbuds. Some people have earbuds without wires, which is nice to have too. But you want to make sure that the clients are prepared for that as well, so that they can manage that piece. Let's see, got another chat coming up. So in terms of, so David Wheeler's asking, are we still subject to our respective licensure regulations? You know, that's an excellent question. My understanding is that the waivers that have occurred with HIPAA take care of all of that. And so I don't think that our board overrides, the board standards are based on HIPAA. I don't think it overrides them. I think that we are in the clear, if you will. I don't think you want to set up your system so that you are waiving HIPAA regulations. If you can set up your system so that you comply with all the HIPAA regulations, which I am doing, then you are set up for post-pandemic processes, but also you're doing the best job to take care of confidentiality with your client. You want to make sure your client is taken care of. That is the big goal here, right? But we're in an emergency situation. So if your client insists that they be on FaceTime and you can't talk them out of it and you give it a solid try, document that in your record and do what you need to do to take care of your client. That's always been my rule. So in terms, Sharon's asking, am I using anything to hear the client better? This is a speaker and microphone. The Jabra does both. So I hear the client and I hear the speaker, and I can turn it down so that if they're really quiet, I can't hear them, and I can turn it up so that I can hear them better. So you can, I don't know why that always comes on the screen with the desk yoga video. I haven't figured out how to turn that off, but it'll go away in a sec. There you go. Now you got your screen back. And you want to make sure you've got your protocols accessible. So you want to make sure that you have your stuff right there next to you. Even though your client's not in the room with you, you may want to show them your SUD scale. No, this is your Voc scale, right? Or your SUD scale right there in the camera. And they can talk with you about it just like you would in their office. Or if you're trying to talk with them about what the brain is like, you may have some handouts on those things. So you want to have all of that accessible, but you also want to have however you keep your notes right there. You want to make room on your desk, wherever you are, kitchen table, wherever it is that you are, that you're working from, and make sure that that stuff is right there for you. So, because you don't have time to get up and fumble through everything. You've got to maximize the time that you have with your clients. I'm going to make those shareable as PDFs. I bought those. This was in, Sharon, in your training. You got a copy of that in your part 1. So you can make that however you want, or you can go to EMDR HAP, Humanitarian Assistance Program, and buy them. They come in that brightly colored, covered laminated, that's the word I'm looking for, sort of model. You want to have notepads. And I have found for me, and maybe this is just me, that I take more notes now than I normally would. I always tell my trainees, nothing between you and your client when you don't have to. So I don't usually sit and take notes a whole lot during a session. I make my notes after. But in these sessions, I'm able to sit at the computer and take notes. It helps me to concentrate better. This is a different setting for me. I don't have a person right in front of me. It feels different. It feels like I could stop and do something else. I could stop and check my text messaging right now. No, I can't. I need to be tuned in. So I have paper right there at the ready for me to be able to take those notes. And you, again, want to have the chart right there with your emergency information. You want to make sure that you've got your set up. I mentioned this earlier. You want it to be as appealing as possible and as the opposite of distracting, soothing as possible, so that they're paying attention to you. You want to help the client see the same thing every time if possible, because that's grounding for them. As you change your set, you're in a different place every time, that's confusing. So some people are using virtual backgrounds, works best on a green screen. Those of you who know me know that I normally, in the last, 5 years or so, I've worn my hair straight. Now it's curly, covers the gray better, I think. And that's why it's back to curly, which is my natural state. But I did that early on because I knew gray was coming, and I thought I don't want to keep changing my look because that unnerves people. So some folks are really, especially folks that have a lot of small parts inside, they want to know who they're talking to, and they need to look pretty similar every time. Same thing for the background. So you want to consider that, especially for folks that are struggling with dissociating. You want to orient them to your setup, but you also want to have them orient you. There's something called, I think Roy Huggins calls it the spin around, where you ask them to take their camera or whatever it is they're using and show you their space. So that, again, you don't want to see stuff that they don't want you to see, but is there anybody listening? You don't want to be in a position where there's the partner who is violent with them standing there listening the whole time, or sitting in the room listening the whole time. You want them to have that kind of privacy. You also want to be able to see enough of your client where you can see their body language. So as I move back, you can see more of me. So when I'm really close, you see less of me. I have one client who likes to do this through the whole session, and we're not currently doing processing, but when we move into processing, I'm going to ask him to just take a little bit of a step back so that I can see him. I have another client who often hand wrings. I can tell, and she's wringing her hands even when they're down here, because I can kind of see the movement. I don't necessarily need to have a full body to be able to recognize that. And I do a lot more explaining. I'm moving my chair away, and I move my chair away. I don't just move my chair. And I do a lot more asking. I notice that there seems to be a little bit of a bouncing going on. Are you shaking your foot? Is something going on that would be helpful for me to understand? So I engage in those conversations. You want to make sure they know to have their phone charged. Reminders are helpful, especially for millennials, so that you can call them. You want to make sure that they have the things that they need to be able to stay grounded. Those things that you normally have in your office, like Kleenex, for instance, do they have Kleenex? Here's some things that you might want to consider using for your clients to be grounded. And I got this out of a webinar that I went to with Jamie Marish and Amy Wagner on EMDR and dissociation that they offered a while back. May still be available on Jamie's website. But things like tissues that I always have in my office. I usually say I'm in charge of the tissues and the time. I'm still in charge of the time, but not the tissues so much, so they need to provide their own. And there are a lot of different things here. Stuffed animals, animal figurines, balls, chimes, drums, a picture of something that they find calming. Maybe their calm place is a beautiful mountaintop in Colorado, and having that picture nearby would be useful. Whatever the client needs, maybe lotions. So maybe there's a lotion, a smell, a tactile sensation that would be useful for them. Maybe if their pets can be calm enough to not distract them too much in the session. I have clients who have their dogs right at the ready and want me to tell them how cute their dogs are. So we're going to be prepared that our clients may dissociate. This is an aspect of our work with EMDR regularly, and we want to make sure that folks who have PTSD, who often dissociate, or other disorders like addiction, these are highly dissociative people, and we want to know about that. So we do the DES, the way that I've always done the DES, or the way I teach DES, is to do it in a conversation. So I share a screen, they see the DES, I go through it line by line with them, we talk it over. I don't necessarily feel like I have to have a score if I understand who they are. Getting a score is important between part 1 and part 2 so that you don't work with those highly dissociated people. And I think some of you here are part 1 folks, so I want to remind you of that. We want to help our clients be present in the session. We want to use the calm scene, the container, and other self-regulation skills to help them be there. So I had prepared this for us to use right now, but in the interest of time, I'm going to skip this. All of you, I believe, were taught Calm Place, at least in your part 1. This is a video, and the YouTube URL is there. If you'd like to look that up, I just took it straight off the internet. It's about 5 minutes long, not very long. So that is something that you may want to consider using. Grounding. So in the middle of working with somebody, grounding is this sort of coping strategy that helps bring them back into the present because they've slipped out, as we were talking earlier about that window of tolerance. They've slipped out. They're all the way in the past. That's a real big problem with folks who dissociate, that they're actually in that memory and not in the room with you. So you want to help them be able to be more present and be mindful of being present, getting away from those upsetting thoughts. And telehealth is a little dissociative, right? Here I am, a little bubble on your screen. Now, if I'm working with my client, I have a bigger picture of them, and I try to get them to pin the video also so there's a bigger picture of me, a little more connectedness, but it still feels very floaty and disembodied. So there's an aspect of telehealth that tends to push dissociative. So you really want to make use of those grounding tools. And here I go back to some of the grounding tools that I learned with DBT. So I hear from Jen that you've got a client whose dog is her protective figure, and she's got a dog at home. It's certainly okay for her to have the dog there. So if her dog, anyone's dog, cat, fish, is grounding for them, you want to explore that with them and see what the temperament of the animal is like and whether or not that would be helpful for them to have that there. And I was only partly joking about fish because, you know, staring at fish in a fish tank can be really wonderfully soothing. So there may be people for whom that is accessible. But if you have, on the other hand, a puppy that is, say, a golden retriever, they're not really good at being calm, generally. So you want to talk over the temperament of the animal if you're going to use them for grounding. So this is straight out of DBT skills. TIPS is the skill, those of you who are not familiar with this. The first one is called TIP, the temperature of your face with cold water. So you can splash cold water on your face. This is really taken from a diver's response where you submerge your face into ice cold water. Divers, when they go in to dive into the water, submerge themselves in cold water, and that lowers the biological systems. The heart slows down, the breath rate slows down, all those pieces. If you're out the box, overwhelmed by your emotions, you want to bring them back down again. So you can do that. You can put ice packs. You can get ice packs in the freezer and make them ice cold and put them on the eyes. And that helps to bring down the biological response to overexcitement. You can do intense exercise. If your client is really struggling with being able to stay present, get them up, run in place with them for a few minutes, do some jumping jacks. They can do more extreme exercise on a regular basis. I had a client one time who was highly dissociative in the session, and he decided to hit the floor and do some push-ups. I did not do those with him. I might run in place, but I'm not going to do the push-ups with you on the floor. Sorry. But he did, and he found that to be really helpful. And then he spent the rest of our conversation walking, not pacing rapidly, but walking with a mindful sense of where he was and what was going on to get himself back into his body. Paced breathing, I think all of you know breath work. and progressive muscle relaxation. Oh, noticing the ice water is an important piece here. So that caution ought to be up above. But the ice water, it's important with somebody who's going to actually submerge their face in ice water that be cleared by a physician first, because it does slow down the heart rate. And anyone with cardiac problems, you need to make sure they're cleared for their cardiac problems before you use that. Progressive muscle relaxation. I think we were all taught that in graduate school or beyond. Tensing and releasing all of the muscle groups are good ways to help us ground. So you can, in the middle of processing, interject these types of skills when someone has slipped out of the window. They're not processing anymore, they're stuck in the past. You can also use self-soothing skills, again, straight from DBT, asking them to use their vision, remembering their calm scene, looking around, seeing the things in their room. The client that I was working with recently in her attic, working on her anxiety about processing trauma, a couple of times just in dealing with that, we paused and said, all right, what do you see in the room? What do you hear in the room? What do you smell in the room? Brought her back into the present. What are you hearing? What are you smelling? You might want to ask them to stop and have a sip of their drink, because the mouth gets dry when we're fearful or anxious, and telling our body that we're okay by having something wet in our mouths can be really useful. You might want to ask them to have peppermints or candies at the ready for themselves. The burst of the peppermint, candy, or gum can also bring them back into the present. It might be, so touch, used in the self-soothing skills, apply a moisturizer. At the end of the session, maybe they want to go take a hot shower or a cold shower, really getting themselves present. And something that we've been using for all of our help is going outside and sitting in the sun, feeling that breeze or feeling the warmth. I think most of you were probably taught the back of the head scale in your training. This is from Jim Knipe, and the idea is that back here, the back of the head, is all up inside here, all the way to the back of the head is in the past. Outside here is in the present, in the room with me, with you, with the therapist. And so we teach this tool to the client early on before we begin processing, so that they have that skill, so that when you say, where are you on the back of the head scale, they'll say, oh, I'm really kind of in here. Then you're going to need to use those grounding techniques to bring them back out and present. It may take a long time or a short time. It depends on your client and where you are in that process. Most clients are able to access grounding skills if you practice them more in the preparation phase. So you want to use this back of the head scale. All right. Pause for a second. Questions about any of those grounding techniques? I see from before the discussion about different platforms, John brought to our attention the issue about the business associate form BAA that you need to have that HIPAA requires. And many of the sites that are like Skype or FaceTime don't offer a BAA, so you cannot make it that way. So when we leave this stage, we're going to have to make sure that we're only compliant. And now in an emergency setting, I think you might want to consider that it is okay. So I'm not seeing any questions here about dissociation. I'm going to move on in the interest of time. We can always come back. Let's talk about technology. So one of the things that helps decrease the freezing or the lag time is to close everything you're not using for therapy. Now, over the last several weeks, I've had every window open on everything I had because I was preparing for this talk and for the talk that I did yesterday. And in between sessions, I wanted to access them quickly. Guess what I had more of? Lag time, problems. Yeah. So it's really important for you to pay attention to that. All of that stuff draws from the system you're working on. Anything you got open you don't need, close it. Moving closer to the router, plugging in your computer, making sure that all of your updates have been done before you start your session. So I got these ideas from Roy Huggins, who I was talking about earlier, who has a website called Person-Centered Tech. And he is who I heard in the very beginning that made me say, I don't want to do video conferencing, because he scared the heck out of me with all of the rules that were in place. Having to move into this and some relaxation of the rules, I'm here. We'll see what happens after. But you know those situations where you're working with your client and they're really opening up about something really important, and in your office you would kind of lean in, talk more softly, and then you realize they didn't hear anything you said because they're frozen. You thought they were listening intently. They didn't hear you because you were frozen. So there you are. Happens all the time, and it is part of the process. So you need to talk with your client about that. You need to make sure that they know that could happen. You want to make sure that they understand that we're all doing the best that we can. Sometimes the video gets so choppy, it's all moving like this. You know when you're seeing that with them, they're seeing that with you. So that's the point at which I'll wave my earbuds or my phone in the picture, hoping that they'll know that what I'm doing is calling them. I may go into chat and say to them, I'm calling. They know we're going to do that, but I try to do that as quickly as possible. Doesn't happen all the time. Most of my sessions, even with a little bit of that glitchy movement stuff, lag or freezing, it still works okay, but it can make you really afraid to go forward. So I want you to have those backup plans so that you know what to do with your clients. You want to make sure that you've got that all taken care of. So I got some notes here to myself. Quitting all those other programs is important. Skype is the worst one. It gets hit the worst. You want to make sure that your Dropbox, your Drive, and other file synchronizing systems are cleared out, because they're using the internet in the background, and that affects your internet. You want to make sure that your cloud backup software isn't clogging your pipe. You might want to shut it down for your sessions and everything else. And you may want to talk with your client also about doing those things so that things move more smoothly for you and for them. So here's the slide on Roy's stuff. He's got some information on informed consents for telehealth, which I have used, and I would highly recommend. Signing documents. So somebody had a question about that before we got started, and I will, full disclosure, say that the way that I am signing documents is not the most efficient, perhaps. So you can use DocuSign, and I have used DocuSign. I actually sold a house during the pandemic, can you imagine? But I DocuSigned that. I opened a bank account during the pandemic. DocuSign, again, worked. It's a fee for service. So you may want to use that. There are a number of different client practice, office practice management systems that offer a client portal so that the client can fill out forms and sign within the portal in a simple practice, and some of the others have that. So I offered you here a website that you can go to find out more about that. That's Cloud Practice Management Systems Review Series. That's a place that you can go to find out more about those online practice management systems and some other pieces. What I've done mostly with clients, when I first sent out the telemedicine consent, which I attached, or I gave to Lindsay to attach for you in the email with the handouts, that telemedicine, some clients were just not savvy enough to figure out how to scan it back in with their signature. So what I accepted from them was an email attachment, an email from them with the attachment back to me saying, I've read and I consent to all of the statements in the telemedicine consent. And I have an email from them that says that. I printed that out, I put that in their folder, put that in my file cabinet, and I'm accepting that. There may be some other recommendations from the group. If you want to put those in the chat, feel free. Here, this is from Joanne Watson-Wong, who was part of our information gathering process for the telehealth guidelines that we developed through Emdr. And she talks about the importance of the therapeutic environment, that you want to make sure that the client gets a sense of having a session when they're in your office. They're taking in a little bit at a time. Maybe you didn't notice those plants until I pointed them out, but there's this sort of warming up of the room that occurs with plants present. When I was trying to figure out my stage, I had a vase over there that was really colorful and bright. It's a vase that I really like. I have in my office. I had my sister look at my stage and she said, "That's so distracting." So I moved it, try to get a little more homogeneous feel for it. This adds up to their perception of the experience. And then they take all that in with all of their other understandings of you if they've met you before. The same thing was on the phone. When you think about doing phone with folks, they're also using limited senses, but they're getting a sense of you. Do they hear your dog barking in the background, or are you in a place where you can keep it quiet so that they have a sense that you're still there? Are you saying uh-huh enough so that they hear you? Are you interacting with them a little more frequently on a phone than you might do in person because you're present? You want to make sure that because only some of the senses are being used, that they're getting that hearing that they need. Video doesn't use all of the senses either. Make sure you're using that appropriately. We want to develop that relationship. We're missing that in-office senses and instincts, so you want to make sure that the webcam generates that for you. Some of us are using laptops so that when we're typing something in on our computer, our fingers are up here. If that's what you need to use, fine. Make that part of the conversation with your client. Oh, my little spider fingers are up there again. That might even be fun for your clients. It's okay. But make that be part of the dialogue. As I said before, I find myself expressing things a lot, saying this is what I'm going to do. You want them to have a sense of what's going on with you. You want to practice some beforehand. And I'm going to ask you to practice right now. So Lindsay, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to put everybody into the breakout rooms. So here's how we pin. If you'll get to your computer and run your cursor over your picture, you'll see there are 3 little dots in the right-hand corner. You'll see the pull down there, and it says pin to video. When you pin yourself to video, you see you. When you pin someone else to video, you see them. So if you have me pinned to video, I think this is set up automatically, you would only see me. What I want you to do in your breakout room is pin your partner. So go up to the little dots, look at the pull down menu, go to pin to video on their picture, and then you'll see just them. Then I also want you to consider practicing some eye movements with them. I'm going to give you 5 minutes in that room so that eye movements can be conducted with clients across the screen. But what if they're looking at a little camera, on a little phone? What you may want to do is ask them, you want to see them, you want to see where their eyes go, and you want their eyes to go all the way from one side to the other. You could ask them to put their hands up and look from one side to the other, or you can ask them to look from one side to the other of their computer screens, or they can put a sticky note on the wall and look from one side to the other. You can also go diagonal and go past the screen, indicating to them that they can go past. So let's take about 5 minutes to practice that if you're interested. And if you're not, please let Lindsay know in chat that you don't want to go to a room. She'll move you out. And let's go. Lindsay, we're on.
All right. And I'm not sure how to exclude anybody. So everyone will be randomly placed in a room. And I think you'll be able to choose to leave if you wish. So I'm going to click the create room button. And I will unmute everyone so you'll be able to speak in your rooms.
And their video's on.
We're not muted?
You're not muted right now.
Oops.
Those of you who don't want to go to the breakout rooms, come back to the main room. Lindsay, is everybody going to breakout rooms yet? Let me see if I can get my video back on. Wow, that was fun, wasn't it? Woo! I can't wait to do that in my, let's see, there we go. I'm going to be doing this shortly in a part 2. Okay, that's not what I want. I'm still trying to get back to the place that I was in before. Whew. So I'm thinking from what I saw as I went around that nobody was getting to do what I wanted you to do. So I'm going to ask you, oh Lordy, I keep going into this other view. I'm sorry. I've lost my screen. Woo, wow. Okay, suddenly it came back, but I have no controls anymore. I can't get to chat. I don't know what to do about that. But I can't, can everybody hear me? Lindsay, can you hear me? I'm the host now, great, but I still don't have it. I don't have, let's see. No controls. So Lindsay, I may need your help with the next poll. We were going to practice pinning and we were going to practice using eye movements, but we weren't able to effectively do our breakout rooms. So I would encourage you to practice this with a friend or a colleague. I did it even with some friends over a cocktail hour, if that has an appeal to you, or you could do it over Bible study, whatever works for you, or Bible study and cocktail hour, however that works. But you may want to have a time together where you're able to practice. And I want to talk about a couple of other ways that you can use eye movements. And that I didn't talk about the metronome. So I talked about looking from one side to the other side of the computer. So on the other side, far enough to where I could look from one side to the other. But you can also go to your browser and look for a free app for a metronome. Or you can, if you have an external speaker, you can have the mic on your phone. I mean, you can have the app on your phone and put it next to your mic, and you can play the metronome, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, which helps them. The external sound is a bit grounding, like Caden's comments, but it helps them to go back and forth, back and forth. So there's that idea. So let's go to the poll now. Lindsay, can you run the poll? Lindsay, are you there? You may be muted because I cannot hear you. Or maybe you're muted. Unmute you. I'm the host, so I have to unmute you. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Carol, do you see the polls in the bottom of the Zoom bar?
I do now.
Oh, okay.
Here. Okay, so now I'm going to run the poll real quick. Is this poll 4? Sorry. Yes. Launch polling. So now, because you weren't really able to do the practice, I'd like to know, instead of it was too elementary, I know all that, just the idea that you know all that would be helpful. So if you could just say, yes, I know how to pin video, or if I learned how to pin video, the second one, I would have some confidence about being able to move forward. And of course, we didn't really do the practice. I know you didn't, because it didn't really work well. And generally, I know that that wouldn't help you be much more confident because it wasn't really working. Our apologies for the difficulties with the breakout rooms. It's new to everybody. We're just trying to figure it out. We're all trying to figure out as much as we can. So it looks like for most of you, the idea of being able to practice would be really useful. Oh, and some people were able to use it. Nice. Some problems. Chris is saying that when you were doing it, when you were small and your partner was big, your movements weren't ideal because your picture wasn't the same on your screen for her. Not sure what that's about, Chris. We'll have to talk about that later. Carol, you were able to use the breakout room okay. Jessica, you're asking about using a mobile device, using an EMDR. I'm going to talk about EMDR apps in just a minute, and that is what I use most of the time. How did you know who your partners were? They were just going to show up in the room. You're going to have to go from the handouts for some of these things. The breakout rooms didn't really work for you to get there. Sorry about that. So ending polling, I would say you've got some ideas now, but you're not really sure where to go. And I get that. There's a lot more to do, and mostly it's about practice. So let me get out of the chat. Close that. Let me get back to shared screen. Is the PowerPoint still up, Lindsay? No. Okay, so I want to go back to shared screen and go back to this. Let's see if I shared the right screen. Do you see what I see? I can't see Lindsay anymore to find out if I'm getting what. Lindsay, is that a yes? Aha, got it. Okay, thanks. Great. So this is what it's like to do telehealth. Glitches, problems, laughter, things working. That's the way it is. Moving on, next slide. You got to build your rapport with your clients. I mentioned earlier that might take longer. That I had already gone over that slide. So starting sessions, you want to make sure your clients feel comfortable and present. You want to develop that space with them. You may want to make a list with them and have them write out and you write out what's going to work best for them. Do they need a do not disturb sign on their door? Do they need to tell their wife to watch the kids while they're meeting with you? What sort of noise distractions are there? Zoom has controls in it to screen out some of the background noise. I had mine on. Did you hear my dog barking? She was barking. She likes to bark. You want to make sure that you're not sitting where you're flooded out with that light behind you. And you want to make sure they've got those tools we talked about before. Once they get started, you may want to start sessions with grounding exercises right from the get-go, because that way you can really strengthen those resources for them and you can develop them if you haven't developed them yet. You may want to add some new resources in, like nurturing or protective figures. Laurel Parnell has written a book called Tapping In, which is a great place to learn more about that. You can use those different types of bilateral stimulation here, slowly installing those positive resources, or you can use remote EMDR, which is one type of online app, or you can use EMDR remote, so they reverse the name, or bilateralstimulation.io, or whatever telehealth platform that helps you have that. I use EMDR remote. It's 2 R's in the middle, and I use that, and it works really well for me. I didn't pull that up, but at the end of our meeting, if I have time, I'll show you what it looks like. So what it does is it sets a ball on the screen. You can invite the client. They have just the ball on the screen and a little picture of you as you have me right now, and they see that. So another tool that you may want to go back and look through, which I taught in my Part 2 training, is the Constant Installation of Present Orientation and Safety, SIPOS, from Jim Knipe. There are scripts available for that. It helps them go into the bad, come back, go into the bad, come back, super quick. So they build some confidence about the ability to do that. The girl in the attic that I was talking about earlier, we did SIPOS when she got stuck. Being able to go into it, come back out, go into it, come back out. 7 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Getting a sense of confidence of being able to be present and being oriented. You want to use all of your tools, and you want to learn new tools if you don't have them yet. So I was going to do some demonstration here, but I'm going to move on because I see we're going to run out of time if I don't. We're actually already out of time. So worst case scenarios, move to the phone if you can, and make sure that you've got that all planned ahead of time. You've got more resources. You've got the virtual therapy report from Emdr. You want to look if you start burning out, because there's a lot of burnout using Zoom, at these sites and find out more about them. You want to consider that take 5 moments of the yoga video. Open it up to questions now. Some of you I know need to leave because I've gone a little bit long, but if you have some questions, please let me know right now in chat. Lindsay, I have to open you up. I'm opening you up, unmute. You're on. So anybody who's got any questions, or Lindsay, that you noticed that I needed to attend to, I don't see any here. So be sure to respond to Lindsay's offering for additional consultation is available through the center. And remember that you're going to get your CEUs from the center again later. And in that, you'll be able to sign up for that consultation. If any of you are interested in being on the email list for our local region meetings, also North Louisiana has region meetings, South Louisiana has region meetings. We're going to be taking those to the airwaves too. And so if you're interested, please share your contact information with me through Lindsay, and I will enroll you. If you're interested in finding out more about ongoing advanced trainings through my business, let me know, and I'll be glad to add you to that. My email address is cmiles@tulane.edu, or you can find me on the web, carolmiles.com. Good to see all of you, sort of. Hope it was good for you. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Lindsay, anything? We're good?
Yep, I think we're good. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. You will receive an email from evidence@lsuhsc.edu, and that will include your CEU certificate. The link, if you are interested in registering for some extra consultation, sponsored by the center, so that'll be free of cost to you. But if you want some more support, trying out some of the telehealth tools that Carol mentioned today. Yep, and if you're trained in other EBPs as well, check out the telehealth resource tab on our website, because we'll be offering similar webinars for other evidence-based practices. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. See you all soon, I hope. Bye-bye.
Bye.